Is this thing still on?
Sounds like they heard us. We are seeing some change.
We need to continue to disrupt the status quo.
And
Now the
now the
work
work
begins.
begins.
You are now about to witness the strength of nursing knowledge.
Welcome to the Gritty Nurse Podcast, an unfiltered discussion on health and healthcare. My name is Sara Fung.
My name is Amie Archibald-Varley, and we are your hosts. Our Toronto Star and the Globe and Mail national best-selling book is available now. Get your copy of The Wisdom of Nurses today. You can get a book for purchase at any of your local retailers like Indigo or Chapters, or pick up your book online through Amazon or other types of retailers. It's also available in various different formats like audiobook and on Kindle. If you read it and you loved it, please leave us a review.
Please make sure you subscribe on our YouTube channel where you can watch our podcast in video format. Like, share, and leave a review. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or any other podcast platform, leave us a rating and review. Thank you to all our listeners and sponsors who continue to support us.
Your support makes our podcast possible, and we're grateful for the partnership and for you believing in our work here at the Gritty Nurse Podcast. Stay gritty.
Welcome to the Gritty Nurse Podcast, an unfiltered discussion about health and healthcare. My name is Sara.
And my name is Amie.
And we are your podcast hosts. So today we have a really interesting thing we want to talk about. And just to preface everything, I want to mention that there is a trigger warning here. I think this is a really difficult article we want to talk about. It's some really bad behavior on behalf of a nurse. And we want to just blow this out of the water and talk about how we're feeling and a lot of the underlying issues behind this story. So Amie, I'm going to let you take it away and give everyone a brief overview of what we're talking about today.
Yeah, well, 2025 has come up upon us like a hurricane.
Like a bat out of hell.
Like a bat out of hell. And, this was one of the first stories that I've seen of 2025 that really struck me. I was actually quite surprised when I came across it on social media, because again, I think when we work in hospitals, we work in healthcare, we see patients and families every day. I think at the end of the day, like, we are amongst the most trusted profession, nurses, right? And again, you don't expect to hear about violence or abuse coming from, the care provider, so the nurse, physician, whoever is in charge. But this story left chills down my spine, and I think it'll leave chills down your spine too. And I think one of the things that Sara and I would like to do is kind of direct people to hearing more patient stories, and really, because I think at the end of the day, people don't really understand what's happening in healthcare, and we want to bring those patient stories to light. So this is definitely one of them, and this is actually about a Virginia nurse. A nurse, she's not Canadian. I mean,
that's the only good thing.
I was kind of like, whew. But I mean, we have problems here as well. But again, this was a Virginia nurse who was charged with child abuse amid a probe in an NICU, which is a NICU, so neonatal intensive care unit, of babies who were suffering unexplained fractures. So let's talk a little bit about the nurse before we even get into like the full story. So this nurse particularly, she worked in a highly specialized area. This is like Sara's wheelhouse.
Yeah, this is my jam.
Her full name is Erin Elizabeth Ann Strotman. She was actually charged with one count of felony child neglect, which is up to 10 years in prison, and one count of felony malicious wounding of an injury for an injury sustained by an infant, which is a maximum of 20 years in prison. So this nurse, particularly based on public records, she was first licensed in 2019, and her nursing license is valid until May 2026. But this is what kills me. So this nurse was allowed to, work. She had reportedly been on paid administrative leave for a year following this case. Sara's going to dive into the case a little bit more before this kind of case came to light. So she was off in November of 2023 for over a year, for over 12 months, when she came back to work in November 2024, and these injuries of these babies started to happen again. So let's dive into the story, the actual incident which occurred. I just wanted to preface the episode with the fact that this person was suspended previously because there were injuries to 4 previous babies. And then upon this new recent suspension and she has lost her job now. There were three babies that came into question in terms of broken limbs and bones. But again, it's just, it calls into question, what are we really doing here? So, Sarah, you want to talk about the incident a little bit?
Yeah, before we do that, I'm just going to run this clip that was in the news recently, and you can hear some patient stories and kind of what went down.
Henrico County's top prosecutor letting reporters know her office will continue to work very aggressively into the investigation into Henrico Doctors Hospital's neonatal intensive care unit. In less than 2 weeks, one woman has been charged and arrested, 26-year-old Erin Elizabeth Ann Strotman of Chesterfield County, who was denied bond by a judge Friday afternoon.
While there has been an arrest for one person for allegedly inflicting injury on a single victim, I would emphasize this is an ongoing investigation spanning potential offenses committed in both 2023 and 2024.
The ongoing investigation centered around 7 babies in total. The hospital alerting the community online that 4 babies had, quote, unexplainable fractures in 2024, similar to an incident in 2023. Strotman now facing charges for 1 child out of the 7.
We will continue to work on building cases if there is evidence present to build other cases to find if there's additional criminal culpability.
It makes me sick. It truly makes me sick.
Dominique Hackey is one of the 3 families who showed up to court for 3 children involved in the entire investigation. Taylor confirmed Strotman is currently being charged in connection to a child whose family was not in court. Still, Hackey says he had to show up.
Justice for my son. Justice for the other families that were affected, the other people's boys that were affected. Somebody needs to be held accountable, and it looks like that day is here.
8 News learned from 2 other families who wanted to remain anonymous that one of their twins who was being cared for in the NICU passed away. Another said her son suffered 12 fractures.
I feel very blessed with what our situation was, and that it was just a broken leg, because it could have been a lot worse. And my heart goes out to those families.
All right, so that was a really, really hard clip to see. And one of the things that I want to pull out from that clip was that the father actually said that it's lucky that my baby only had a broken leg.
Right.
Like that is really the saddest thing I think
And
ever that could be said.
That shouldn't even be like a part of the conversation. Like the fact that they're just like, I'm fortunate that this is like, I mean,
Yeah.
it's crazy. Like that shouldn't be what a parent is worrying about when they, their child enters the NICU. That those are the sickest, most compromised children in the hospital.
Right. And as an NICU nurse, there should never, ever, ever be an incident where a child suffers a broken bone in the NICU. Like, I think back to the time that I worked in NICU, and that never happened, like literally never happened. And I just feel so much for the parents who I could see the anguish in their eyes when they had to leave their baby in the NICU at the end of the day and go home. Like that was so hard on them. Now, just add on top of that the fact that there's a nurse who's literally injuring babies by breaking limbs. And I don't even want to get into why that is, because it is awful.
Right.
But what really happened with Erin is that on Tuesday, January 7th, she had not entered a plea yet and declined to comment on the charges. But what we do know about the victims is that they were charged she was charged in connection to a single incident, but this investigation is ongoing and law enforcement officials have so far identified not 1, but 7 victims. Yeah. 7 victims. And I just kind of wonder if there are even more out there, because we know of 7. I'm sure there are more that are yet to be uncovered, but we don't know the full story yet. Obviously, this number could increase. So 4 babies from last year, I guess 2 years ago now, 2023, right, and 3 babies from 2024. But the police division is encouraging families to reach out if they believe that their babies have been impacted. Meaning, again, I think that there are more families out there that we just don't know about. There was someone named Dominique Hackey, who was a father of twins, and he states that his son Noah's case is one of those that had been reopened. He first went public with a story with the local news station revealing the confusion surrounding one of his twin son's injuries. He suffered a mysterious fracture to his tibia in September 2023, and his mother, who is a former NICU nurse herself, reported the injury to social services. We want to make it clear that Noah didn't have a bone disease. It wasn't accidental and it wasn't from his birth. Somebody did this to our son, and we're going to find out who this is.
Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine as a parent how painful that would be to, again, like I've had 3 out of my 4 children in the NICU. And again, it was another nurse who caught and said, something seems untoward here. And I think about this incident and I think about how many other people might have been around it, or how covert this nurse had to be in terms of her actions. And again, this is where the fact that it came from an external source, so like the family members brought it to the attention,
And not other nurses. Yeah.
makes me kind of question what again was happening with the hospital system in terms of the checks and balances they should have. How could they have reinstated this nurse to continue to work when she was already on administrative leave for 4 other incidences that seem similar to this particular case? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. And it almost speaks back to, and again, we'll have Bruce come on in a couple weeks talking about some of the things that he's seen in terms of assaults in hospitals. But again, it's just like, who should be held accountable? I think the hospital also needs to be held accountable here in relation to the fact that it seems like, when these things happen, instead of being like, hey, let's do a full wholesome investigation and turn things over to the cops, that they waited.
Well, here's the thing, right?
I think
they waited until
it happened again.
Yeah.
And it was only that the police were investigating,
right,
that they're like, okay, we're going to cooperate.
Well, here's the thing, right? I think until it left the hospital walls, until the police were involved, until they went to the media, they weren't going to do anything. And now that it's blown out of the water, now I think it's a matter of self-preservation. Like, we need to protect our reputation. We can't let this go further. Okay, now we're going to do something. But I feel like people should be rewarded for blowing the whistle, and people and organizations should be rewarded for being proactive. It's just that this is really how we have to change the narrative. And so not wait until there's police involved or investigations or the media before something's actually done.
Yeah. So again, this is the statement that came from the hospital. And there was a longer statement, but I'm just going to read the small statement that they put out. We've been assisting law enforcement in their ongoing investigation and will continue to do so. Any media questions or inquiries about that investigation should be directed towards law enforcement, the hospital said in a statement on January 3rd. We are both shocked and saddened by this development in the investigation, and we're focused on continuing to care for our patients and providing support to our colleagues who have been deeply and personally impacted by this investigation. Like, holy, this is such a shit statement. Sorry. I mean, like, where is it? Like, they're shocked and sad, and their concern is for the patients. It says like, their patients and the staff, but
there was nothing, about the nurse.
About the nurse.
Like, holy crap. Okay, so here's the thing, right?
What the hell?
Like, just speaking as a nurse, it is not easy to break a baby's bone. Okay, I'm just gonna put that out there. Like, it's not easy to do that, and what this nurse would have had to do to break bones is just like, I can't even talk about that. It is really, really, really awful. And to think that your baby's already in the NICU because they're sick or they're premature or something else is going on. And like, just going back to literally why we became healthcare professionals, to help others, to help and not harm. I mean, these babies left with worse injuries than they probably came in with.
Yeah. And I mean, a part of this, which is even more like, I mean, the abuse allegations are awful, breaking bones, all of this. One of the things that really stood out to me too was not only was she breaking bones, and again, if you see on her arraignment when she was arrested and what she's being charged with, is also with inflicting wounds. So not only was she breaking bones, but she was actually, I think it said that they're like stab wounds and various different things that she was doing to these innocent, poor babies. So why didn't the hospital do more? They said in their current status, the NICU is closed at this hospital because they're investigating. It says as part of the investigation, police said they're reviewing dozens of videos from the inside of the NICU as they pursue a wider investigation with the assistance of Henrico's Child Protective Services, so the Department of Social Services, and also the Henrico County Commonwealth Attorney's Office, the Virginia State Police, the Virginia Department of Health, and the Office of the Attorney General. I don't understand why the hospital didn't do more. And I kind of wonder, like, for example, in the States, they do have more processes, I believe, there than we do even here in terms of these investigative forces. But again, it just begs the question, who are we out there really trying to protect? Are we trying to protect patients and families? Are we on the right side of history trying to say, at the end of the day, if we make a mistake in a hospital, here's how we're going to do things to make it right or ensure that it doesn't happen again? Or are the interests lying solely with protecting the organization, protecting the CEOs, protecting the people who are behind, these multi-billion-dollar corporations within the United States of America? And again, it's a tricky place to be. And it should never be in the place where we're looking at healthcare and saying, okay, we hope that this doesn't happen. We hope that they have our best interests at hand. They should.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I don't believe that they did.
Right. And I think just from a hospital perspective, right, having an NICU is like the crown and it's the glory. It's
Right.
like, okay, we have a high acuity unit. That means we're a good hospital and people want to work for this hospital. So I could see why selfishly they would want to keep this under wraps. I just think that this is going to be 10 times worse than it could have been if they just been forthcoming about what had happened.
Yep. I completely agree. And I think that, we need to do a better job, and we need to, again, hold our institutions and our leaders accountable. I kind of think about what would happen if this happened here in Canada. Would we be quick to, do an investigation? Would this nurse end up, going on? She was on paid administrative leave too.
Paid.
It's not even like
that is
it's not
crazy.
even like she was just like on leave. She was being paid the entire year she was off. Like, how would things have gone down here? And unfortunately, I feel like it would be the same. Again, thinking about cases like Elizabeth Wettlaufer and various other nurses who have committed these types of atrocities and have fallen under the radar for such a long time. And seeing again the rise of fake nurses who people who aren't even licensed practicing in areas of healthcare, and it becoming more problematic here in Canada as well. So I think, as much as we're being hypercritical of the US and their medical system and what happened and the oversight or the lack of oversight and accountability, I don't think that it would have happened any differently here. And I think that speaks to us starting to make changes in terms of policy design to ensure that we protect our patients, because they are vulnerable when they come into our walls.
Right. And I think, just as someone who used to do a lot of case reviews and quality reviews, I think that it's really important to look for patterns, right? Like, if there are more than one instance of a broken bone, that should be a red flag right there. Like, I feel like this should be a never event. So a never event is something that should never happen under any circumstance. So an example of a never event from where we came from would be babies being switched at birth. Okay. Like, that's obviously something that should never happen. A baby who is kidnapped off the ward. Okay. That is something that should never happen. I feel like a broken bone in an NICU should be a never event. And like, we're talking about 7 families that we know of, right? Yeah. So I feel like after the second case, something should have been done. And who knows, maybe something was done, but they're not being forthcoming about what that was.
Yeah, again, I think this is where we need to see accountability in healthcare. Like, I think at the end of the day, just like we haven't even touched, like, we're January 2025, and there's just so much to talk about. Like, we haven't even scratched the surface in relation to talking about the accountability measures that we need to see in healthcare, and to see amongst healthcare workers, and that we should all be a part of the solution, right? We should all be a part of saying, okay, we need to see better healthcare outcomes. How are we going to achieve this? How are we going to get there together as a collective? So, I mean, I'm looking forward to having more engaging conversations, pushing and challenging the status quo, because I don't want to see things like we've seen in the States. Again, I think I mentioned at the top of the episode that we will have back Bruce Sackman on. We're going to talk about abuse, and we do actually slightly touch on this case again in New York with Luigi Mangione. And again, we don't want to see that type of vigilantism happening. But again, we just have to have the conversation about why are people feeling this way.
Right.
At the end of the day, assault and abuse from healthcare providers to patients and families is, like you said, a never event. It should never, ever occur. one of the last points I want to bring out is one of the things that we saw within the tweets and within the conversations was, is race a factor? Does race play a factor? The Henry Police Department released a statement just this coming Tuesday, January the 7th, cautioning social media videos alleging that the victims in this case were targeted by the suspect on account of their race. And what they said it's not factual. Again, here's the statement. Said, due to the sensitive nature of these cases, specific information, including race/gender types, injuries, is not able to be released. Detectives do not want to compromise the investigation moving forward, the statement continued. But again, I have to question this. And why I'm questioning this is because my health equity hat has to come on. And again, we can't be removed from the idea of that racism does play a factor in how healthcare is delivered in Canada, in the States, around the world. This nurse was a Caucasian nurse. She was a white nurse. And we only have the fact that we've seen through the YouTube video, the one family that came forward was a racialized individual. Right. The father was Black, and I believe the mother was white from the pictures that I saw. And the baby was clearly brown. Was race a factor? We don't know.
Right.
However, based on rhetoric, based on things, we have to see it as a social determinant of health. It is a part of, for example, from quality cases or reviewing cases, race can be a contributing factor in terms of how people are treated or how people receive healthcare. And we've seen this through the deleterious effects of racism rippling through healthcare, whether it's a Black individual, Indigenous individual, LGBTQ, all these various different, intersecting identities. We have seen these issues in healthcare. So I feel like the statement from the police, I'm not going to say, I mean, you probably could have seen my face, or maybe you can't, but like, of course, the police is going to say that racism is not a factor. I'm just going to say that. But at the end of the day, we have to do our due diligence to ensure that there are no stones left unturned, and we investigate this fully and examine whether it was a contributing factor or not. And we won't know that unless we hear from Erin and they indeed do their job and ensure that that's a part of a metric that they're examining.
Right. And I think just from the family's perspective, we really need to think about what support we're offering to affected families. And I don't mean support as in they take legal action and they win, let's say. I mean actual support for the families, because that's traumatic to have that happen to a child. It is actually really traumatic to go through legal process too. It is traumatic to share your story over and over again, to share it on media, to get people to hear what you have to say. So I think there should be really support for the families from multiple different sources. I mean, I don't even know about this hospital anymore, but this just kind of highlights to me why there's so much distrust within certain groups and hospitals. Like, it only makes sense. Your child was injured. So what would make you want to trust the healthcare system again? It would make you not want to trust them and not seek care.
Well, like you said, Sarah, there is that historical aspect where there has been mistrust because there's been harm, right? There has been actual harm to Indigenous patients. There's been actual harm done to Black patients solely out of the way that they look. And again, I don't care if you don't want to have the conversation out there. We're going to have the conversation here because it needs to be had. Like I said, it's a social determinant of health. We are seeing that there is racism within healthcare. And unfortunately, it will erode folks' trust. And again, this is just another example of, someone might be watching this and saying, hey, it makes me want to make sure I have a racialized nurse. Maybe I want to have a nurse who looks like me. Maybe I don't feel comfortable with, this person caring for me because I don't see that they're going to, treat me as a human being. Again, these children were these babies, these infants, these vulnerable little precious ones were viciously attacked for no reason.
Right. And so I just want to go over some takeaways from today. So obviously we're going to be talking about issues. We're going to bring them to light. I think just from a healthcare perspective, being more understanding towards patients and maybe why they haven't sought care or they delayed seeking care, just understanding everything that happened here. And whistleblowing. There needs to be more support for whistleblowers. Maybe there were nurses or other staff at this hospital that knew what was happening and came forward and were reprimanded, or maybe they didn't come forward because they felt afraid of what was going to happen to them. So we need more support for that. We need to talk about this more. Like you said, Amie, talk more about health equity and racial disparities and how this impacts our healthcare system.
Yeah, how it impacts the patients and families, right? I think maybe just the last point here is one of the things I tweeted about was about, how do we prevent these types of folks coming into healthcare? Again, it's a hard question to ask, right? Because at the end of the day, I think about how I got into nursing school, right? So there wasn't any skill testing question. Like it was just kind of like, I had the right grades. I was able to, apply to the program. And if I had met those metrics, those specific, merits, then you'd get into the program. But how do we weed out students who are racist? How do we weed out students who might be sociopaths? Again, it's a more difficult question. And one of the things I had mentioned was, some nursing schools and some medical schools are using various different things like the Casper or the Kira. I believe Casper is more of like questions that are like I guess scenario based, like how would you act in this particular scenario, where the Kira is a little bit more standardized. They might ask you questions about health equity and various different things to kind of get to the meat, the value of that individual and how that person might interact in society. Of course, it's not flawless, but I think we need to start looking at incorporating these types of questions into admissions policies. Again, like I said, it's not going to be perfect. People can lie and people can be, smarmy and swooning and beat the system. But I think people would be hard pressed, again, if you are racist or you have these biased views, to answer a question about like, what does health equity mean to you? I think that might catch those red flags. So I think that, again, we have our work ahead of us to make sure that we are bringing in not just the best and brightest, the people who have the greatest marks, but people who value serving people and want to work with people who want to build community, who want to see better healthcare outcomes for all people, and simply aren't racist asshats.
There you go. So let us know what you think. And if you have stories, please share them with us. We want to know how this has affected you or other topics you'd like to hear about.
So thanks again for tuning into the Green Nurse podcast. This is our first episode back, but we will be back next week sharing more stories of patient experiences and talking about how we can challenge them and do best for patients and families within the healthcare system. Thanks so much.
Thanks for tuning in. Thank you for listening to the Gritty Nurse podcast. If you have any suggestions or want to hear a specific topic, email us at grittynurses@gmail.com. That's grittynurses@gmail.com.
We are also speakers and authors available for engagements related to advocacy, nursing, mental health, and health policy. Please connect with us.
We want to take a moment to express our deepest gratitude to our incredible sponsors. Their generous support has been instrumental in making our podcast a reality.
Thanks to their belief in our mission, we're able to bring you engaging content and connect with our amazing community. We're truly grateful for your partnership. Thank you.